December 30th, 2025, a Tuesday morning in Columbus, Ohio. Staff at Athens Dental Depot are watching the clock. Their colleague, Dr. Spencer Tepe, hasn't shown up for work. No call, no text, nothing. And if you knew Spencer Tepe, you'd know that was wrong. This was a man who was always on time, always. The kind of guy who'd call ahead if he was even going to be 5 minutes late. By about 9 in the morning, the office had tried reaching him multiple times. They tried Monique, his wife, nothing there either. That's when Dr. Mark Valrose, the practice owner, who happened to be on vacation in Florida, got the call from his staff. Something's not right. Valrose didn't hesitate. He picked up the phone and called Columbus Police at 8:58 a.m. to request a welfare check at 1411 North 4th Street in the Weinland Park neighborhood. Officers were dispatched at 9:10 a.m. One arrived at 9:15. But here's where things went sideways in a way that's hard to excuse. The officer went to the wrong address, knocked, no answer, left, and that was that. Meanwhile, Spencer's friends and co-workers weren't sitting still. Several of them got in their cars and drove to the house themselves. At 9:57 a.m., one of them called 911 again. He was standing outside the Tepe home, and he could hear something through the walls. Children crying inside, but nobody was answering the door. 2 minutes later, another co-worker called. They'd been trying to reach Spencer for 3 hours now, and then, just after 10 a.m., came the call that changed everything. One of Spencer's friends, it's unclear exactly how they got inside, called 911, and the words that came out were the kind no one ever wants to say.
We've got several calls on that. What's changed since the last person I talked to?
There's a body. There's
a body inside?
Yeah.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me get you on the line with the medic, okay? Stay on the line.
He described Spencer's body lying next to a bed in a pool of blood. When Columbus police and paramedics arrived, they found both Spencer and Monique Tepe on the second floor of their home, dead from gunshot wounds. The Franklin County Coroner's Office pronounced them both dead at 10:11 a.m. But in the middle of all this horror, there was one small mercy. The couple's 2 children, 3-year-old Amelia and 1-year-old Beckham, were found inside the house, physically unharmed. So was the family golden doodle. Those babies had been in that house, likely asleep in their beds, while their parents were being murdered just rooms away. They woke up that morning to a world that had been completely destroyed, and they were too young to even understand it. Here's what investigators noted right away at the scene. There were no signs of forced entry. Whoever did this either had a key, knew how to get in, or was let inside. There was no firearm found at the scene, which immediately ruled out murder-suicide, and 3 spent shell casings were recovered. Based on forensic evidence and the last known timeline of activity, police estimated that Spencer and Monique had been killed sometime between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. that morning. So this was a double homicide. Someone had come into this home in the dead of night, shot 2 people multiple times, and walked out, leaving 2 toddlers behind in a house with their dead parents. And at that point, police had no suspect, no weapon, and no clear motive. Columbus had recorded 84 homicides in 2025, but this one felt different. To understand what happened here, you need to know who it happened to. So, who were Spencer and Monique Tepe? Spencer Louis Tepe was born on December 9, 1988, in Cincinnati, Ohio. He grew up in a close-knit family. His parents were Tim and Yvonne Hildebrand Tepe, and from early on, he was the kind of kid who threw himself into everything. Spencer went to Ohio State, where he earned a Bachelor of Science in Biology with a double major in Spanish. A pre-dental student who chose to also become fluent in Spanish, not because he had to, but because he wanted to be able to serve Spanish-speaking patients in a meaningful way. After undergrad, he stayed at Ohio State for dental school, graduating from the College of Dentistry in 2017. He landed at Athens Dental Depot in Athens, Ohio, where he quickly became known as a dentist who went above and beyond. He poured hundreds of hours into continuing education, developed a specialty in dental implant therapy, and built the kind of patient relationships where people genuinely looked forward to their dental appointments. His colleagues described him as someone who cared deeply about every single person who sat in his chair. Monique Frances Sabatersky was born on October 14, 1986 in Chicago, Illinois. Her parents, Ignatius and Nereda Mendez Sabatersky, moved the family to Worthington, Ohio when Monique was just a year old, and that's where she grew up. She was one of those kids who was into everything: soccer, running, horses, reading. She had this infectious smile that everyone who knew her mentioned. It was apparently the first thing you noticed about her. Monique went to Ohio State too, where she earned a master's degree in early childhood education. She worked at a daycare while she was in school because she genuinely loved working with kids. It wasn't just a career path, it was a calling. Spencer and Monique met online in 2018, and from everything their family and friends have said, the connection between them was immediate. They just clicked. Their relationship was built on love, mutual respect, and a whole lot of goofiness. They were the kind of couple that made you believe in the whole thing. They got married in a private family ceremony. And here's a detail that, knowing what happened later, is almost unbearable. They got married inside their home at 1411 North 4th Street, the same house where they'd be found dead 5 years later. That house wasn't just where they lived, it was where they chose to commit their lives to each other. It was the center of their world. Together, they had 2 children, Emilia, born in 2022, and Beckham, born in 2024. By all accounts, Spencer and Monique were incredible parents. They threw family gatherings constantly, the kind where everyone felt welcome and nobody wanted to leave. When they were killed, they were less than a month away from their 5th wedding anniversary. In the days following the murders, Columbus police were under enormous pressure. This wasn't a random act of violence in a high-crime area. This was a young professional couple killed in their home while their babies slept nearby. The community wanted answers, the media wanted answers, and investigators were working around the clock to find them. The initial crime scene had given them some things to work with: 3 shell casings, no forced entry, no weapon left behind. The killer had come prepared and left clean, or at least tried to. But in 2025, in a residential neighborhood, there are cameras everywhere: doorbells, security systems, traffic cameras, business surveillance, and that's where detectives started digging. On January 5, 2026, 6 days after the murders, Columbus police released a piece of surveillance footage to the public. It showed a person of interest walking through an alley near the Tepe home between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. on the morning of December 30th. The figure was wearing light-colored pants and a dark hoodie pulled up over their head, keeping their face down as they moved through the snow-lined alley in the darkness. This wasn't someone out for a late-night stroll. This was a person who knew exactly where they were going. But the bigger break came from the vehicle evidence. Detectives had been poring over every piece of surveillance footage they could get their hands on from the surrounding blocks, and they identified something: a silver SUV that appeared on multiple camera feeds, arriving in the Tepes' neighborhood shortly before the estimated time of the murders and leaving shortly after. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, and here's where it gets interesting. That silver SUV was displaying a stolen Ohio license plate. At different times, it was also seen with an Arizona plate. Someone had gone through the trouble of swapping plates, which tells you this wasn't impulsive. This was planned. Someone went out, obtained stolen plates, put them on their vehicle, and drove to that neighborhood with the specific intention of not being traced. Through what can only be described as grinding, meticulous police work, the kind that doesn't make for dramatic television but absolutely solves cases, investigators tracked that vehicle. And when they did, they connected it to a name: Michael David McKee, age 39, vascular surgeon, and most critically, the ex-husband of Monique. The moment that connection was made, the entire investigation shifted into focus. Because Michael McKee wasn't just some random name that popped up in a database. He was someone with a documented history of threatening Monique, someone with motive, someone with, as it turned out, the means and the planning to pull something like this off. Police traced the silver SUV to Rockford, Illinois, about 79 miles northwest of Chicago, where McKee was employed at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center. When they located the vehicle, they found something else: fresh scrape marks on the windows, in spots where stickers or decals had previously been visible in pre-murder surveillance footage. Someone had tried to change the vehicle's appearance after the fact. And then there was the cell phone evidence. According to court documents, McKee's cell phone was left at his workplace, at the hospital in Rockford. On the night of the murders, the phone showed zero activity for approximately 17 hours, from the evening of December 29th until afternoon on December 30th. 17 hours of silence, covering the exact window when someone drove from Illinois to Columbus, killed 2 people, and drove back. Now think about that. This is a working surgeon. These are people who are essentially tethered to their phones. And his phone just happens to go dark for 17 hours, sitting at his workplace 300 miles away during the precise time frame of the murders. That's not a coincidence. That's a man who understood that cell tower pings could put him at a crime scene, and who took steps to make sure they wouldn't. So who is Michael David McKee? On paper, he looks like a success story. Born June 29, 1986. Attended Ohio State as an undergrad from 2005 to 2009. Went straight into the Ohio State College of Medicine. Earned his MD in 2014. Completed a general surgery internship at Ohio State Wexner Medical Center in 2015. Then moved to Roanoke, Virginia, for a general surgery residency at Virginia Tech Carilion Clinic, which he did from 2015 to 2020. After that, a vascular surgery fellowship at the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore from 2020 to 2022. By 2023, he had medical licenses in California, Nevada, and Illinois. He worked at Las Vegas Surgical Associates from 2023 to 2024. And at the time of his arrest, he was a vascular surgeon at OSF St. Anthony Medical Center in Rockford. No public disciplinary history, no red flags in his professional record. A man who had spent over a decade in medical training and practice, who held licenses in multiple states, who by all external measures had his life together. But that's the surface. And in cases like this, the surface is almost never the whole story. McKee and Monique Sabaturski got married on August 22, 2015, shortly after he started his residency in Roanoke. It's worth pausing here because this is the beginning of everything that follows. 7 months. That's how long the marriage lasted before they separated in March of 2016. 7 months. Monique filed for divorce in June of 2017, citing incompatibility. The divorce was finalized on June 15, 2017. The separation agreement was straightforward. No kids, no spousal support. McKee kept the $230,000 house in Roanoke. Each kept their own vehicles and debts. On paper, it looked clean, amicable even. The legal documents described it simply: differences have arisen between the parties, and they are now living separate and apart from each other. But what was happening behind closed doors was something else entirely. After the murders, when detectives started talking to Monique's family and friends, a very different picture of that marriage, and the years that followed, began to emerge. Multiple people told investigators that Monique had confided in them about what her marriage to McKee had actually been like. According to these witnesses, McKee was emotionally abusive during the marriage. He made threats on her life during the marriage and after it ended. Monique told people that McKee had forced unwanted sex on her, that he had strangled her. And then there were the threats that continued after the divorce. Court documents contain a statement that McKee told Monique, and I want you to really hear this. He could kill her at any time and would find her and buy the house right next to her, that she will always be his wife. Let that sink in. She will always be his wife. 8 years after a divorce, 8 years after Monique had moved on, met someone new, gotten married, had children, built an entirely new life. And in Michael McKee's mind, none of that mattered. She was still his. Her brother, Rob Misla, later spoke publicly about what Monique had shared with the family. He described the lasting impact that McKee's abuse had on his sister, how it affected her profoundly, how even years later, the trauma of that brief marriage was still something she carried with her. A former FBI agent named Jennifer Coffender, who commented publicly on the case, described McKee as exhibiting a deep-seated resentment and hate that just built up and finally came to this conclusion. And that's the thing about obsessive possessiveness. It doesn't fade with time. It ferments. For 8 years, while McKee moved from state to state, from residency to fellowship to practice, that fixation on Monique didn't go away. If anything, it got worse, because every milestone in her new life, her new relationship, her wedding, the birth of her daughter, the birth of her son, was another reminder that she had chosen someone else, that she had built the life he felt entitled to, and she'd built it without him. Here's a detail that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up. On December 6, 2025, exactly 3 weeks before the murders, Spencer and Monique traveled to Indiana with several other couples to attend the Big Ten championship game. A fun trip, a normal thing for a young married couple to do with their friends. On that same day, according to court documents, McKee's vehicle was captured on surveillance video in the area immediately surrounding the Tepe residence in Columbus, while Spencer and Monique were out of state. Court records confirm that McKee was not scheduled to work at St. Anthony's Hospital that day. So picture this. McKee, a surgeon living and working in Illinois, takes a day off, drives roughly 300 miles to Columbus, goes to the neighborhood where his ex-wife lives, spends time around her house, while she's conveniently hundreds of miles away at a football game. What was he doing there? Scouting the house, checking the locks, the entry points, the camera positions, familiarizing himself with the layout, the neighborhood, the best routes in and out. We don't know for certain, but we know he was there, and we know what happened 3 weeks later. And here's another piece to this puzzle. During the Big Ten championship game, Monique left the venue early. She went back to the hotel during the second half. When their friends asked Spencer why his wife had left, he told them she was upset about something involving her ex-husband, 3 weeks before she was shot to death in her own home. That tells us Monique knew. Maybe not the specifics of what was coming, but she knew something was wrong. She was frightened enough that it ruined an evening out with friends. She was carrying this fear with her, and it was affecting her daily life right up until the end. And yet, and this is something that comes up in so many of these cases, there appears to have been no restraining order, no formal legal protection. Maybe she thought the distance between Ohio and Illinois was enough. Maybe she didn't think the system could actually protect her. Maybe she was afraid that escalating things legally would provoke exactly the kind of response she feared. We'll never know her reasoning, but what we do know is that distance didn't save her. 8 years didn't save her. Moving on, building a new life, having children, being happy, none of it saved her. Because the person who was fixated on her was willing to drive hundreds of miles in the middle of the night with stolen plates on his car and a suppressor on his weapon to make sure that if he couldn't have her, no one could. On January 10, 2026, 11 days after the murders, Michael David McKee was arrested without incident at a Chick-fil-A restaurant near his workplace in Rockford, Illinois. Federal ATF agents and Columbus police coordinated the arrest. He was booked into the Winnebago County Jail in Rockford. 11 days. From the discovery of the bodies to handcuffs. Given the complexity of the case and the geographic distance involved, the suspect living in Illinois, the murders in Ohio, that's solid, aggressive police work. When investigators searched McKee's residence in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood, they recovered multiple firearms, and one of those firearms produced a preliminary match through the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, NIBIN, connecting it to the shell casings found at the Tepe crime scene. Columbus Police Chief Elaine Bryant confirmed the ballistics link publicly. A weapon found in McKee's home matched the evidence from the house where Spencer and Monique died. On January 12th, McKee made his first court appearance in Winnebago County. He was represented by a public defender at that time, and he waived extradition, meaning he agreed to be transferred to Ohio without a fight. He was extradited to Columbus and booked into the James A. Carnes Corrections Center on January 20th. The Franklin County Coroner's Office released their findings in January 2026, and the details are difficult to read. But they matter, because they tell us something about the nature of this attack, how deliberate it was, how personal it was, and how much violence was inflicted on two people who were almost certainly asleep when it began. Spencer Tepe was shot 7 times. 7. Wounds to the head, neck, torso, and upper extremities. Monique Tepe was shot 9 times. She was shot even more than her husband. Her wounds included a gunshot to the face, specifically the zygomatic region, the cheekbone area, 3 shots to the chest, 1 to the right torso, 1 to the right forearm, 1 to the right hand, 2 to the left arm, and at least one of those shots was fired at close range, 9 bullets, and a shot to the face. If you want to understand the level of rage and hatred behind this crime, that detail tells you everything you need to know. Forensic pathologist Dr. Armstrong, who conducted the autopsies, noted something significant about Spencer's wounds. There was no stippling or fouling. Those are the powder deposits you'd see if a gun was fired at very close range, within about 18 inches. The absence of those marks on Spencer suggests he was shot from a distance of more than 1.5 feet, which points to a controlled, deliberate shooting rather than a close-quarters struggle. The evidence also indicates the shooter approached Spencer from his left side and Monique from the right, suggesting knowledge of the bedroom layout and the ability to navigate in the dark. This wasn't someone stumbling around an unfamiliar house. The coroner described the wounds as consistent with large-caliber rounds and noted that the weapon had been fitted with a threaded barrel capable of receiving a suppressor on a firearm, used to kill 2 people in their beds at 2 or 3 in the morning, with children sleeping in the next room. The suppressor wasn't for the victim's benefit. They were going to die regardless. It was so the neighbors wouldn't hear, so no one would call 911 until morning. So the killer could walk out, get in his car with the stolen plates, and drive 300 miles back to Illinois before anyone even knew what had happened. That is premeditation at its most chilling. Spencer and Monique Tepe did everything right. They built careers. They found each other. They got married. They had children. They created a home filled with love and warmth, the kind of place where friends and family always felt welcome. They were a month away from their 5th anniversary. They were raising a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. They were, by every measure, living the life they'd worked so hard to build, and none of it protected them, because 8 years earlier, Monique had been briefly married to a man who apparently decided that she belonged to him forever. A man who, despite building a successful medical career across multiple states, despite all the outward trappings of having moved on, never actually let go. A man who, according to court documents, told his ex-wife he could kill her at any time, that she would always be his wife, that he would find her, and who, prosecutors allege, finally made good on those threats in the darkest hours of December 30th, 2025. The celebration of life for Spencer and Monique was held on January 11, 2026, at Schrodinger Northwest in Upper Arlington. Over 1,000 people showed up. 1,000 people, coming together to mourn 2 lives that should have had decades left. Amelia and Beckham are now in the care of family. They're 3 and 1. They won't remember their parents' voices, or the way Spencer apparently made everyone laugh, or how Monique's smile could make a bad day better. They'll learn about their mom and dad through stories and photographs and the love of the people who are raising them now. And that's the cruelest part of all of this. Not just that 2 people were killed, but that 2 children were robbed of parents who adored them. On January 16, 2026, a Franklin County grand jury handed down a 5-count indictment against Michael David McKee. The charges: 2 counts of aggravated murder with prior calculation and design, meaning the prosecution is alleging these killings were planned and premeditated. 1 count of aggravated burglary, and 2 additional counts of aggravated murder tied to the burglary, alleging the murders were committed during the course of, or while fleeing from, the break-in. Every single count carries firearm specifications: a 3-year specification for using a firearm to commit aggravated murder, and a 6-year specification for using a firearm equipped with a suppressor. McKee's formal arraignment took place on January 23, 2026, in Franklin County Common Police Court. He appeared remotely via closed-circuit television from jail and pleaded not guilty to all charges. A not guilty plea at arraignment is standard. It's procedural, it preserves the defendant's rights, and it doesn't tell us much about the actual defense strategy going forward. What does tell us something is McKee's choice of attorney. He retained Diane Minash, a Columbus-based criminal defense lawyer with 27 years of experience. Minashi is not a random pick from a directory. She's the attorney who successfully defended Dr. William Husel in 2022, a case where Husel, a physician at Mount Carmel Health System, was charged with 14 counts of murder for allegedly prescribing fatal doses of painkillers to patients. Husel was acquitted on all counts. That case made Monash one of the most prominent defense attorneys in Ohio, particularly in cases involving medical professionals accused of serious crimes. At the arraignment, Monash did not argue for bond, which was a strategic decision. In a double murder case with this kind of evidence, ballistics, surveillance, documented motive, getting bail would be virtually impossible, and pushing for it would waste resources and goodwill with the court. As of early February 2026, the next court date is set for April 16th, a status hearing to discuss discovery progress and set timelines. This case is still in its early stages. Michael David McKee sits in the Franklin County Jail. He is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. If convicted on all counts, Michael McKee faces life in prison without the possibility of parole.